And we're out slow dancing in the blue light, whoa. Blue light, whoa. Oh, sorry. My name is Benedict for Higher Hertz. Yes, I've got a new phone. Actually, it's a used phone. But it does mean that we've got access to the pretty blue light, so all is well with the world again. In this video, we are looking at Addictive Drums 2. I did not realize how old this was. It has been around for like ever, dude. I don't think they were the first of the drum samplers. That might go to battery. I really don't know. But this goes back a fair way into time. So is there an Addictive Drums 3? Don't ask me. And is this still a good package? Does it provide enough to justify itself? Does it help you do the job? Bearing in mind, I'm not a massive fan of these kinds of products, I'm going to suggest that, yeah, maybe more than not, that it still is a good package. I particularly like the drums that are here, but there are some limits as to what I can access in the demo, which is a tiny bit frustrating. And I think a tiny bit limiting, bearing in mind they've got some pretty heavyweight competition. However, it is worth a look. We will hammer straight into a demo, because otherwise I'm going to mess up what I've done. Obviously a pretty sort of all-out kind of rockin' with a bit of synth and what have you. It's all thrown together fairly quickly using presets and having some control over the drums. It's not entirely a preset. Here I did fiddle with it to get results that I was happy with in the situation. Let's pop this aside for the mo. If we want to listen to just the drums, and we've got a bit of reverb going on in here. So that's the plug-in. There's a little bit going on in the rhythm bus. Pop that back on. It does a nice job. I do like the sounds of at least the drum kit. I think there's only one, I'm not sure, that is supplied in this. Or what there is of the drum kit. But notice no toms. For the bass, we put that reverb back on, which is of course Hertz delay. Bit of the old C1L1 Molot to bring it together as a bus. If you want to just hear what everything else is happening. So for a big mid to late 80s style rock type production, these sounds are really very cool. And to be fair, I built this around that sound. So the next thing that I do may not be as entirely fair. I also checked, well, okay, how am I going to go if I make my own MIDI? And yes, that works, and it seems to work pretty predictably, which is good. So that's good. And also, because with all the other drum things that I've looked at, I have given some sense of comparison to other things in the market. Here I'm just going to choose SSDD because I just didn't want to put a lot of time into it, to be fair. So, Addictive. SSD 5, the free version. Slate. Obviously, it's down to kit and personal preference. I must say I rather enjoy the big bombastic sound that's coming out of at least this particular kit compared to the one in Slate. The one in Slate seems a little... I was pleased with it at the time, but in comparison, it seems a little bit kind of flat. But we also have to be fair that Slate's mixer doesn't have the amount of processing power that Addictive Drums has. And it's really fair to point out there is that difference, hence my having to push another 6 dB to kind of get the same feeling of level out of it. So in terms of comparison, you'd kind of have to go do your own based upon your preferences and also the appropriate drum sample kits, etc. But seeing the piece was built around that Addictive Drums kit and pattern, then of course it sits very, very comfortably. Have a look at Addictive Drums, and it's from XLN Audio, and they are from a little place called Sweden. You may have heard of them before. Sweden, for some bizarre reason, seems to punch way above its weight in half-frozen dirt. Propellerhead's Reason, little group called ABBA, some dude called Max Martin, Volvo, Saab. Unfortunately, Saab cars don't exist anymore, but Saab have been a pretty big deal. Fighter jet engines, all kinds of full-on things. Obviously, plenty of other things that I'm not mentioning, but they seem to have a very strong number of developers working in at least the music space. I had a look at the names here, and while a lot of the names seem to be the same as some of the Reason names, Mats, Matthias, Stefan, it's possible that in Sweden there really only are 4 names. Matthias, Sven, it's I don't know. So as to whether there's any crossover with development team, I don't know. But it kind of wouldn't surprise me because there are some things about feel that I do see in here, which I think are positives about the product. Website. It's got a slightly different approach, which confused me for just a little while. But a really nice thing is straight up they say, do you want to try this? So they're very open about letting you try things. I do have a downside with that, but fair enough. They then ask you to view collections, but I'm like, what do I want a collection for? I just want to know about the product. So we scroll down, featuring professionally recorded acoustic drums, live rhythm performances, and high-quality built-in effects. Is that blah blah, or is it true? I'm going to go with more true than not true. That's good. It's got this interface which... There it doesn't look that great, but in action it seems nicer. I always have some issue with this sort of stuff. You know, show me great big fancy studios so I feel all studio-y. And that makes me feel like I'm buying slabs of this when I buy this product. If you're recording that in the studio, I see your argument for this. But in reality, what is done in a studio like that in a real session, not a let's just boom cha boom cha boom cha and sell the loops, nothing against that. But that is quite different from an actual session where you've got John Lennon and Paul McCartney punching each other in the face over some woman called Onion. You don't get that studio thing until you do that studio thing, and you sure as bananas need peeling before you eat them. Avoided that one. You don't get that when you're sitting at home on your own looking at a screen. So please just be cautious as the nature of all of these products. So it's nothing about this particular product, but about the class of products. And that's across, sadly, most VSTs this way. You're not actually buying this experience when you buy the product. You've got to actually live the experience to get that experience and therefore the kinds of results. My advice is if this is the thing that's swaying you, then actually find a drummer. Actually find some people to sit with and work with, because that's going to give you this experience far more than anything else. And besides, the room isn't the thing that makes great records. But that said, the sounds, at least that I have here, pretty darn nice and fun to use. Same thing with this picture is like, where do you start? Oh, well, a drum kit that, well, it's eclectic. We will give it that. But this idea of, oh, well, you'll have access to absolutely everything at once. Do you need everything? Question, really? I know there's that mindset that we need like 47 trillion drum kits, but when we look at the big names in drumming, the real big names in drumming, how many drum kits did, say, Bill Bruford, who's my go-to number one bestest drummer ever, how many kits did he work with? Well, yes, he was famous for the Simmons thing, but when he was playing a Simmons kit, he was playing a Simmons kit. He wasn't playing a Simmons kit and a Ludwig and a Paster and a Pearl and a this and a that and the other all at once. He was just playing that kit. So the idea of having to have 47 drum kits at once before you can even consider that maybe drumming is possible is a very flawed one. Where do you start? To get the most out of the, you will start with one of our collections. Okay, took me a while to get here. And then they offer you even more kits. And again, this is a danger. There is no such thing as an indie rock drum kit, or a funk drum kit, or a Blue Oyster drum kit. Okay, maybe there is actually a drum kit called Blue Oyster and Black Oyster, but there is no such thing as a metal drum kit. You know, we need to be very, very careful with the lure of trillions of options, rather than simply going, this is the drum kit that I've got. And the reality is, Nicko McBrain's going to sound like Nicko McBrain's going to sound like Iron Maiden, no matter what drum kit we give him. He's not Iron Maiden because of whatever drum kit he uses. It's because he's Nicko McBrain and he knows how to do the Maiden thing. So these things aren't necessarily wrong, but they are a danger, a weakness in the human condition, and particularly the DAW thing. And I say this about everybody's product like this. It's a warning from a seasoned mix engineer, producer, music-making person that you don't want to get trapped in the, oh, well, I can just get more and more drum kits and more MIDI loops and more single kit pieces. Or I might guess if you're going to play this game, you might as well play it to the full and sell people like oversized kick drums and huge tambourines. Why not? So a lot of stuff. Price. And this is how I worked out how they sell things in the end, because eventually I thought, what if I take this, where do you start literally? View collections. Get started with an Addictive Drums 2 collection. So what's the price really comes down to, what are you spending? From what I can gather, if we scroll down, it looks like $159, I assume US, is the entry point. And you can pick and choose what things you want in your collection. I honestly did not look too specifically into what you get, because if it were me, I just want a bloody drum kit. It's like when people ask me, what kind of cheese do you want? Cheese-flavoured cheese, please. What kind of pie do you want? Pie-flavoured pie, please. That's entirely up to you. If you believe that you are a new soul person and therefore you need a new soul drum kit with new soul patterns to do your new soul thing, then go down this path that seems to be suited to you. And then you can spend a lot more getting more stuff. You're cool. So it seems to be that the base price is $159 and you can skew it towards whatever it is you think you're going to want. Melody things maybe would be of more interest to me than certain other things. Jazz brushes, yes, fair enough. Spend some time, work it out. So what do I see as the, what we'll say, good and bad of the product? Then we'll look into it more specifically. I think the drums, at least what I've got here in this demo, sound good. That is a certain amount of value judgment because I like big bombastic drums. Growing up through the late 70s and definitely through the 80s, I love big bombastic drums. That's the whole idea of drums, is that they be. Not always. There are times you want them to be small and subtle. But that doesn't mean that they should be dry and flat and papery and soulless, characterless. They should have character. These appear to have character. I like that. I think that despite some limits, the GUI, the workflow, is pretty clear. And that is good. There are a few of these other things that I've looked at, and especially some that I've reopened after this and sort of gone, oh, okay, what am I going to do with that? They feel messy and confused. The whole idea of a product list like this to me is being able to get the job done, but being able to ease the process. You know what? I'm not a drummer. So if I'm doing drum programming, when I am doing drum programming, there are two approaches. One is I can say, okay, well, what if I had a drummer? And that's the virtual MIDI loop attacking these samples kind of approach, so I can try and pretend that I have, well, they reference Cozy Powell here. Cool. Wouldn't be upset if Cozy wandered in. Hey, Cozy, want to play drums? Yes. Brilliant. But it's not the same. So we're looking for the ability to ease that process as much as possible without abandoning the fact that if I'm the composer, I am the composer. So if I'm composing the drums, just pulling in other people's loops is not my approach. It might be your approach. You might be okay with that, and you might justify that by saying that if Cozy came in, that drums would be on Cozy. I wouldn't be composing the drums. You know, he'd be working out what he hits where and when. Fair enough. That's the value of a great drummer. That they should be listening to the material that's there and going, okay, Benedict, I think I dig what you're doing here, and playing to match the material that I'm doing. But the problem with the MIDI loops is they can't hear the material that I'm doing. Therefore, I am always the drum composer. So yeah, the GUI is good enough in that sense. Something that I do like, which we'll see as we move forward, is a velocity transform thing. I've liked that in other people's things, but I like it better here, at least in the short term that I used it. Negatives, limits, problems. The demo is very limited. There are a lot of things missing. There are no toms. You might have noticed in this case, very limited stuff. And that's okay, because I don't believe that they should have to, give away the whole stable of all the horses and the ponies and the girl ponies and the My Little Ponies and everything. But where they're saying, hey, you can hot swap your snare for 47 million other snares, all hotter than the one you're currently using, and then not allow us to at least try and see what happens and how we feel so different about it, I've got no sense of what these other kits might really be like. They have a working solution for it, but I felt like, at least by modern standards, with the competition that they've got, with freebies and what have you out there, might be a little limited, but take your time to understand how the process works, and hopefully you get over that, or you go, I just don't dig the sounds and the flow, and you go somewhere else. Fair is fair. The mixing can end up becoming a little complex, but that to me is always the problem, and I've said this about every one of these. When you try to duplicate the mixing console, the big mixing console experience here in a little window, we're going to find ourselves bouncing from place to place and having to handle this here and there, and not realizing that what's handled here is not the same as what's being handled there. It's a little and I did actually have an annoyance, which I have taken off, but I found a problem with the perspective panning between audience and drummer. But it turned out simply because you have to make a decision here, and you have to make it here. So rather than sort of the decision you've been making here automatically echoed there, it's just a case of knowing the product. And again, the usual, always raised with these, it's very easy to think that it's all about the presets and that you just need to buy more. Please don't do that. If you have one drummer, you have one drummer with one drum kit. He should be listening, she, it, goat, don't care, not being judgy, should be listening to your material, what you've got, what your song's about, and then performing to back that. Not just going boom, splat, boom, splat, boom, splat, and that being good for absolutely everything, because that's how you end up with MIDI sound, because nothing comes together. Bit of mixing can help that, but really be aware that if you're just going, oh, well, I need different presets, whether that's different drum kits or different drum performances, it's probably just because you're not thinking, how do I make this fit? What does this piece really need? And flipping through presets till something sticks is sort of okay, but it's really not the same as having a competent to good drummer who's going, sounds like a ballad. Maybe I shouldn't be playing double kick drums with triplets on my side tom. Sounds very blast beaty, but it's not very Celine Dion. So there's a lack of intelligibility or intelligence that these should bring if they were a real drummer. Looking into features of said device, we've got presets and what have you. Here they do seem rather limited. Fair enough. They've got this thing where you can actually pre-hear things. Actually, I'll just turn off this, because while I love it, it's probably not very fair. And get rid of that too. Back to where we were. These are audio patterns. Recorded, no doubt, around this. The ones that have a play on them means that they can actually be live. Stop! Do that with every single one of them. And we can move our way through other things. But one of the problems we've got is that these are largely not available. But giving us some sense of what they might be. But that's never really my idea of fun. There's all of this sort of stuff as well, which, yeah, okay. Whatever, I would let you go down that path. The thing here is that we've got access to, we don't have access to any of this. We need to go back to something that we do have access to. I wasn't trying to be mean there. It's just, so this is something we do have access to. We've got the fairly common grid of slots that we can whack things we can whack into. As one would expect, but not necessarily do, based on something I played with recently, then you've got the ability to change velocity and therefore levels and performances. Cool. We can load, but there's nothing else to load. Like I say, it would be nice to be able to load at least one more thing. There are a whole lot of things, but if we don't have a license for it, we can't load it, so it's all a little academic. It is possible to tie things together. I will say I didn't really get it. Maybe it's something else, but there's the ability to tie kit pieces together. Cool, we can change our level, we can move to edit mode, and move through different options, but again, kind of limited. We can mute, solo, and empty our slots. All nice and functional. We can't show the full functionality because the option's not there, but all nice and functional. If there feels to be a decent amount of variability in these performances. Maybe some of the other kits, if we could try them, would have, noticeably different sort of sound, but this is pitched up as being a bombastic 70s, 80s kind of a rock kit, so it's a reasonable enough progression that we hear there. We've then got this edit mode, so we can edit our kick, snare, hi-hat, what have you. Again, these things are knocked out. Some have the ability to change fundamentals of the performance. And that's kind of cool. In some ways I would kind of like to have more, but that is kind of cool. We've got the ability to move through, so various different ways of controlling how we do things. We've got the ability to choose how much of this particular sound we're going to hear in our overheads and rooms. This is one of the ones that took me a while to work out, and initially I thought, oh, this is really messed up with regards to audience or drummer perspective, but you set up your panning in your overheads or rooms here, which can be different from your panning here. I'm a little undecided whether that's wise or not. I think I would probably assume that the two should be the same, but fair enough. Maybe there is some reason that you would want them separately. I don't know. An interesting thing is that you can also change width, including going backwards. So it's kind of like an XY pad, only without the XY. So initially you may find yourself a bit all over the place with that. Control-click zeros things. So if I wanted my kick to be off to one side in the overheads, as well as off to one side here, I would do this. If I wanted them to be separated from each other, I can do that. The fact that you can separate is maybe very interesting if you need to do the Van Halen one with your drums. They actually did with guitars. So it does give you a certain amount of control there as to how you handle your overheads. So that does tell us that our overheads and our rooms are really faux, as in they are not really real recordings. They are merely going into some sort of process that gives us the illusion of overheads and rooms, which means that if you don't use them at all, as in if you take them out of the game and control that yourself on your own desk with your own mixing and what have you, more power to you. Before we get upset, and I can't remember how to do it, where to do it, because I never looked for it, there is the ability to choose what output you have for any particular drum. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so we choose our separate outs and what have you. I'm not going to go into that because I hardly ever do it. But if you do want to have a default template in your door, then you can make it that your door opens with this with like 47 outs or however many outs this has got. Don't quote me on that. It just has it before somebody really gets upset and feels the need to ask me. You've then got some extra controls. Sometimes the turn the control on is white or silver. Sometimes it's orange. Sometimes the outer one is this. Sometimes they're a little from column A, a little from column B. I kind of wonder at the logic. Maybe there's a logic I haven't grokked, or maybe it's just a little bit inconsistent. Nonetheless, it's not shocking. We've got the ability to alter our response, and this I do like. Remember I said I kind of liked this sort of thing. So we can make it kind of one-dimensional. Every kick sounds like that. Or we can really soften our sound down. So there's a fair amount more control there. And hear how our sound becomes quite, And that is cool. I like that. There are times where I would be really pleased to have access to. Sometimes this lags. I'm not quite sure why that is, whether it's something else is going on my machine thing, but a few times I've noticed it has lagged. But that is nice, being able to get a fair amount of variation from the device. We can turn pitching on. So if our pitching is up high, we seem to be able to offset that for overheads and rooms. Okay, fair enough. Interesting. I have no particular opinion, but it's interesting. We then have this pitch envelope. It's pretty fast, which we would hope for. And this is obviously getting into stupid effect territory. But we can change our sound a fair amount with that, and I quite like that. Tone designer. So again, like some of the other things that I've looked at, there are a few ways to split the transient and body of the sound and change what we get. I like that. So a couple of different options. Seems to be either or, not both. And then a volume envelope. That I think is actually really rather cool. So the ability to control your sounds to a fair extent is good. It is really good. You need to take some time to get your head around it and learn how it works, but it is good. And then we can narrow down our whole range. Yeah, we're getting a fair bit of lag here. Maybe it just doesn't like Reason. Nonetheless, we've got a fair ability to control our drum, and that's nice. This is just noise. You might think, why would I want to do that? Well, you know what? Go back to older records and you will find that there is a fair amount of noise as gates open and close on these things. So if you're looking for that tremendously detailed, immersive kind of thing that is a real drum kit recording, don't overlook this. Because that sounds like a sample. Now it actually starts to sound more vibrant and alive. There's compressor and distortion, and we can swap that with tape and shape, which can also be duplicated or swapped over there as well. Compressor and distortion. We have to different kinds of on and off buttons. Anyway, you get used to them. Initially, set with no threshold and a 1-to-1 ratio. It's a little sort of silly. Why set up a compressor that's not going to do anything? Fair enough if you set it up with a threshold like that, but I spent a little bit of time going, well, it doesn't do a lot, until I realized, the ratio is down. It's an interesting compressor. It takes a lot of the control away from you, but it delivers interesting results. The decisions that have been made are kind of cool. They sort of prioritize achieving the kind of drum sound they think you're probably going to be trying to achieve. Is it the sound that you're always going to want? Probably not. Is it going to be a good sound? Probably. So that's kind of cool. The compressor inbuilt. You've then got this kind of drive thing. Tube, iron transformer. Obviously we're overdoing it somewhat. Air pressure. I'm not quite sure what that one is, but it has a charm. Crunch. That's nice. That is cool. And then changing the frequency range. I think this is a pre, maybe it's a post. I don't know, but there's a fair amount of versatility in this. I think it's got to be like a pre-EQ or something. It's because here how the drum is still there. There's still... It's whatever's going on. You'd have to read the manual on exactly what that is, but that's pretty cool. Zap is pretty aggressive, heavy. Could do that for hours. That's pretty full on. So you've got access to these various, Bit Crush, of course, these various modes for doing mean things to your sound. And more often than not, they are going to be usable sounds. Whether it's the right sound for you is a whole other argument, but they are going to be usable sounds. There's an EQ here. Which lets you get pretty sort of hack and slashy. So it does its job. That is good. And then a tape. Just watch the tendency to turn the bottom end up on everything. You'll find it really hard to mix. And a fair amount of control for how you can bring things in and out. Don't take the tape and shape thing to be designed to be as dramatic as compressor and distortion. So versatility of sounds is pretty high. Control of the output. You've got inserts, which is these you can turn off, and then you can access sends as well from here. So there are 2 sends for effects. That happens on every one of these. This little bit here can change a bit based on what we're hitting at the time. So no argument with the sound setup. Takes a little bit, got to work out how it works, but it is cool. And then these effects, we've got 2 exactly the same. They call them a delurb. Typical Swedish humour. They seem to love naming things very funny, like Reason Studios and Red Rum being murder backwards from the shinning. This is either a delay or a reverb. It's a delay that kind of fields itself into a reverb. Just turn this one. I did have some strange moments there where I had to switch 3 things on to make this work. I couldn't duplicate it. But we've got the ability to purely as a delay, and then we could have the other one as a as purely a reverb, should we so want. But that always creates that kind of nasty split effect. And, okay, if you want that very specific sound, but this allows you to, as though you had a delay feeding into a reverb. So you can set up your delay in one way, and then you can set up your reverb in another. Sounds good to me. EQ for this reverb thing, and the routing can be pre or post master inserts. So you've got your inserts on your master, which is the same essential stuff as what we had before, and then does this reverb come back in before or after that? And obviously, if we've got some good old-fashioned compression happening, our results are going to be quite different. So there is no right or wrong there, but pushing effects into our masters our master inserts, our compressors and what have you, can really be very powerful, especially if looking for a hugely bombastic sound. Made a couple of records that rely on goth, and that's been one of the techniques that I've shown in those videos, where we're pushing the snare into a reverb, which then goes into a compressor. So we get that smack push down, and then whoop, the reverb blooms, and you get this really great feel on that snare. So that really covers all of those, and then it comes to the beats. Patterns, but they probably were running out of space to type that. You can narrow things down by choosing a particular thing and auditioning. To learn not to do that. If we liked this and said this was the thing that we wanted to do, then we could drag that and drop it here, and we've got the MIDI. And that is an actual performance with loosey-goosey timing, the whole box and dice. It adjusts to whatever tempo we've got, and that is all very good. If we had access to everything, then there should be quite a few variations in here, so we should have more than just one of these things. Great, how much you get comes down to how much you spend, obviously. You can shortlist things. This was kind of cool. So if we've got something running, we can choose how we want this to sit with regards to the dynamics of the performance. You know, weight it to heavy hitting, weight it to soft hitting, or going as broad as we can, and then controlling accents on eighths and sixteenths. To loosening up timing and velocity and everything. That's interesting. How great it's going to be in practice, I'm not sure. And also just be aware that if you sit here going, oh, that's the groovinest, funkinest drum pattern ever, you're going to have to make sure that everything else matches to it. Which does bring me to some of the next features. Oh, something you may have noticed is this lights up. When we're playing, this lights up. It just records whatever it's hearing and waits for whatever's to die away. And then we've got this little WAV file we can drag and drop. And there we go, we have... I have not noticed that on any of these other things. It's kind of cool. I don't think I'd ever use it, or not a lot, but it is kind of cool how nice and easy it is to drag both MIDI and audio out into your DAW to do stuff with. Now, what I was going to say here is if you set up a groove, like how the time is moving, because we are fiddling with time, here's one we prepared earlier. So this is pretty loose, which is good. It wants to be. If you have a real drummer, they don't play like a machine. If they do play like a machine, they're probably not the right drummer. I took this groove and applied it. So you'll see that there's no groove applied here, but almost everything else has a groove applied. So if we took just our rhythm bus, we'll turn that off. Groove stuff is down to your DAW, but most will have something like this. If we take our... rhythm bus. Sorry, it's so weird only having one screen. And if I take off the groove, feel how they don't really fit together anymore? That compressor is off, which is fine. Suddenly they move together. So a nice thing here was that I could grab that MIDI performance by a real drummer and take its groove and apply it to everything else, which means that as everything else moves in, it sounds MIDI and disconnected. Now at least it sounds like a performance where all those parts belong together. It also meant that where I decided to try programming my own little drumulation, I could use that groove that was already attached to the rest of the piece and move from what would be like this, which is okay because everything's together, but a bit straight, to having a roll to it. So the groove thing is cool, and if you do start by saying, okay, I'm just going to roll drum beats until I get this, then make sure that you drag that MIDI in, extract the groove that has been created here, and apply that groove to everything else to some degree or other. Doesn't mean that you wouldn't consider applying a little bit of randomness. We've got some randomness of velocity here, so I might even make my clip, rather than 1 bar long, I might make it 4 bars long, or even 3 bars long, so it doesn't recur every 4 bars, just to keep movement going. That, I think, is really rather cool. So at the drum head, we can adjust velocity of performance and how the sound behaves, and at the groove level, we can adjust that as well. That, I think, is rather nice, because if you're going to go with I'm getting the VST to be my drummer, then I think that kind of control is well handled. In terms of grooves, well, there's probably an awful lot, but again, it's just kind of limited by what we've been allowed to have access to here. That's being altered by the kick, or was it the snare? Something's got... Something's pumping noise in, but that's also a headphone thing. Again, once you bring it up into a mix with all the things that you would normally do to a proper mix, these drums become really lively. At least the kit that I've been given here becomes really lively. I wish there was a way that it didn't do that. They all seem to do this. And I wish that they had some way of intelligently knowing not to do that. But maybe I need to learn not to do it myself. It's only when I'm playing around. Once I'm doing real work, it doesn't really happen, but it is aggravating when it does. So we get a nice, big, bombastic, lively sound, and that's what I like about it. So my final words are that while these kinds of programs are not the way that I work, out of probably all of the ones that I have tried, and I've tried a few now over the last little while. If you track back through the videos, the Higher Hertz videos here on YouTube, you will find various drumulation programs, Easy Drummer and Steve Slate and what have you. And I've quite often used the Power Drum Kit 2, which I like. It's just dead simple. This is probably head and shoulders above in terms of versatility, especially as you drill down into being able to control individual sounds. It's got that very Swedish approach to how to use things. So once I get my head around their groove, which is surprisingly close to the Reason groove, then it sort of comes alive a little bit better. So it's not a thing I'm going to rush out and buy because I just don't do this kind of work. But if someone were to say to me, oh, well, I want to get serious about it, then there are things about, not so much the Easy, because it struck me as limited, but their more fancy version of that was kind of, at least in theory, cool because they gave you a fair amount of control. Modo, I thought the theory was great, but I felt in practice that it was just quite limited as to what you could do with those sounds, despite the fact that they were supposedly physical modeling happening in real time. This gives you a fair amount of variety from sort of mushy, muddy, poor quality 60s recordings. Not that all 60s recordings were poor quality, that's not what I'm saying. Through to skinny puppy kind of let's get nasty sort of stuff is all doable there out of the one kit. And I'm a big fan of that, as I've keep pushing from the beginning. If you have one kit and you know what you're doing, you can do almost anything with it. So in that sense, if I were to apply myself to one, even though this is long in the tooth, and I have no ideas whether there's plans for a 3, this would appeal, and the fact that it behaves a lot more like a Reason device would appeal as well. I have played with Reason drums as their rack extension, and I sort of found it a little similar to this. I don't think it had as much control per head, but I've found that it was pretty easy and cool to get into. I don't recall that having patterns built into it. The playing in this, from what I can gather, seems okay, but to me, I again always feel like it's irrelevant because it's, unless I'm going to write a piece to their drum pattern, I don't feel like it's my pattern, my piece, what have you. But that's going to end up being a personal choice, very much a personal choice as to whether it's the right path for you. But I think there's plenty about it that works really well. So I can understand why people sort of made it their thing, and they were like, I'm Addictive Drums, man, because it is a solid product, and it's standing the test of time in which it has been in use. So I hope you have found this useful. Again, try to not just present the product on its own and do a little rah-rah, but to talk about things in general around this, how to be a more productive composer, whatever it is you do in your DAW, around this product and these styles of products. If there are any questions, hit subscribe and fire them on down below. Please don't be asking us for support, because that is down to Excellent Audio. I wonder if that's supposed to be excellent minus a T, because maybe the Swedes don't like ZT. Don't know. probably gets in the way of vodka. Just joking. No aspersions, no judgments. I think the Swedes have a sense of humour. I'm sure they do. Yeah, so if you have questions, fire them on down below. Broad sort of stuff. Make sure you hit that subscribe, please, because there's a fair amount of time and money that goes into this. Letting us and YouTube know that it's valued is of course only fair in return. Plus, if you develop the habit of engaging with people, having conversations with people, it gets much easier when you want to do that. Remember, we were talking about the pictures of the studios and how you feel like you're buying into that. Well, talking with people, that's a big part of the studio experience, because studios is you've got to deal with people. You've got to deal with the miking engineer. You've got to deal with the recording engineer. You've got to deal with the tape op. You probably don't talk directly to the tape op. You're probably not allowed to talk to the tape op. But you've got to deal with all these people being there. The producer, when it comes to the mixing, you've got to deal with the mixer, and if you approach it going, oh well, I'll just tell him what to do because I'm the client, and you will soon find that it ends up being an unproductive session. So if you want that kind of experience, learn to talk to people and engage, and that way you're getting yourself closer to the real studio experience. And then when you are talking to, if you hire out to a mix engineer, then you will be a lot more used to talking and engaging and expressing what you need and getting the right results, which is the right results for the song, not the right results for your ego. If you get the right results for your song and the song goes well and people are like, bugger me, isn't that good? Oh, that Hotel California, amazing. Then that's where your ego gets its real stroking, and then it's untouchable, it's unassailable. Benedict for Higher Hertz, higherhertz.com as well, different stream of information, and of course your ability to access the Hertz delay, which you hear doing stellar reverb duty here as well. Most importantly, go out, have fun, have a great day.